Artemis 2 is in danger, and for 4 minutes, nobody will be able to help. When Orion strikes the atmosphere at 40,000 kilometers per hour, the air surrounding it will ionize into a plasma sheath so dense that every radio signal will be completely blocked. The crew will watch the windows turn white. They will feel the G-forces building. They will hear the atmosphere tearing itself apart around them. And in Houston, every screen inside Mission Control will go dark. Nothing. No signal. If the heat shield holds, communication returns. If it does not, the silence simply continues. Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen launched from Kennedy Space Center on April 1, 2026, aboard the most powerful rocket NASA has ever built. They are the first human beings to leave Earth orbit since Apollo 17 in December 1972, the first woman beyond low Earth orbit, the first black man, the first Canadian. Their spacecraft will carry them more than 46,000 kilometers away from Earth and about 7,600 kilometers beyond the far side of the Moon, farther than any human being has ever gone. And every single meter of that record-setting distance must be paid back in full during re-entry. Getting to the Moon is a propulsion problem. Getting home is a survival problem. The part of this mission that keeps engineers awake at night is not the launch, which went almost suspiciously well. It is not the translunar injection burn that hurled Orion toward the Moon at escape velocity. It is not the 50 minutes of radio silence while the crew moves behind the far side, where no signal from Earth can reach them. It is the final 10 minutes of the entire 10-day mission. More specifically, it is a span of roughly 4 minutes during peak atmospheric re-entry when the outside of the capsule reaches temperatures above 2,160 degrees Celsius. The crew loses all contact with Mission Control, and the heat shield either works or it does not. There is no abort option, no backup plan, no second try. If something goes wrong during those 4 minutes, nobody on the ground can do anything about it, and the crew will not have time to do anything either. A capsule returning from the International Space Station re-enters at around 28,000 kilometers per hour. That is fast, but the thermal loads are well understood from hundreds of missions. Orion will re-enter at just over 40,000 kilometers per hour, Mach 32, 32 times the speed of sound, the fastest any human being has ever traveled. At those speeds, the air molecules in front of the capsule cannot move out of the way. They compress into a shockwave, superheat, and ionize into plasma. The temperature on the face of the heat shield climbs above 2,160 degrees Celsius. For comparison, structural steel melts at around 1,370. Titanium fails at about 1,670. The carbon fiber and titanium skeleton of Orion's crew module would turn to liquid in less than a second without protection. That protection has a name: AvCoat. AvCoat is what engineers call an ablative heat shield, built to destroy itself on purpose. As the spacecraft slams into the upper atmosphere, the outermost layer chars under the extreme heat. That charring absorbs enormous amounts of thermal energy. The char then erodes away into the airstream, carrying the absorbed heat with it. Layer by layer, the shield sacrifices itself, so the structure underneath stays cool enough to survive. NASA used AvCoat on every Apollo command module that brought astronauts home from the Moon between 1968 and 1972. It worked perfectly every single time, so when Orion needed a heat shield capable of surviving lunar return speeds, NASA went back to what it trusted. They probably should not have been so confident. The original Apollo heat shields were built as a single honeycomb structure containing roughly 320,000 tiny hexagonal cells. Each one was filled by hand with AvCoat material, painstaking work that took months. For Orion, Lockheed Martin simplified the process. Instead of filling hundreds of thousands of individual cells, they produced about 186 pre-machined AvCoat blocks, each shaped to fit a specific location on the heat shield's 5-meter-wide carbon fiber skin. The blocks are bonded into place like pieces of a puzzle. It saved an enormous amount of time. Whether it preserved the same thermal performance was a question nobody could answer until the shield actually flew. And then it did. In November 2022, it flew. Artemis 1 sent an uncrewed Orion on a 25-day journey around the Moon and back. By nearly every measure, it was a triumph. The celebration lasted until engineers got the capsule back to Kennedy Space Center and removed the heat shield for inspection. More than 100 locations showed unexpected damage. Large sections of charred AvCoat had cracked and broken away in irregular chunks. Not the controlled, even ablation that decades of ground testing had predicted, but jagged, unpredictable material loss that, in some places, exposed layers that were never supposed to directly face re-entry temperatures. The pattern matched something very specific about the way Orion returned home. Artemis 1 used a maneuver called skip re-entry. Instead of diving straight into the atmosphere, the capsule first dipped in to shed speed through aerodynamic drag. It then used its aerodynamic lift to skip back above the atmosphere like a flat stone bouncing across a pond. After a brief coast in near vacuum, it dipped back down for its final descent. The advantage is precision. It extends the distance the capsule can travel during descent, giving mission planners more flexibility in choosing a splashdown site. Apollo never had this. Skip re-entry was supposed to be the modern upgrade. Inside the AVCOAT, it turned out to be catastrophic. During the skip phase, when the capsule climbed back above the atmosphere, external heating dropped sharply. That triggered a chain reaction. AVCOAT produces gases internally during ablation through pyrolysis, essentially burning without oxygen. Under sustained high heat, those gases vent outward through the porous char layer. The system is self-regulating. But when heating paused during the skip, the char layer became denser, less porous, and less permeable. The AVCOAT underneath was still hot enough to continue producing gas. That gas had nowhere to escape. Pressure built up inside the blocks. And when the capsule plunged back in for the second pass, those pressurized pockets ruptured, blasting charred material off the shield in chunks. There is one detail in the investigation that does not get talked about nearly enough. Even with more than 100 locations of unexpected char loss, the temperature inside the Orion cabin never rose above the mid-70s Fahrenheit. The thermal performance exceeded expectations. The AVCOAT was doing its job of blocking heat. The problem was that the material was tearing itself apart while doing it, and nobody could predict where or how much would break away next. An ablative shield with unpredictable ablation is like a parachute that opens but may have random holes in it. It will probably slow you down. You just cannot be certain by how much. NASA did not replace the heat shield for Artemis 2. The shield was already built, already bonded to the crew module, and replacing it would have added years to a program that had already slipped from 2024 to 2025 to 2026 through a cascade of technical delays, weather disruptions, and hydrogen leaks during dress rehearsals. Jared Isaacman, the NASA administrator who personally flew to orbit aboard a SpaceX Dragon on the Polaris Dawn mission and understands spaceflight risk from inside a pressure suit rather than behind a desk, reviewed the data and accepted the plan to fly as is. Instead of rebuilding the shield, NASA changed the flight plan. Skip re-entry has been removed completely. Orion will now fly a steeper, more direct descent, striking the atmosphere harder but for a shorter period of time. No pause in the middle, no moment where trapped gases can build up and fracture the shield from within. The trade-off is significant. Higher G-forces, greater structural loads, more intense peak heating, a less flexible splashdown zone. NASA tested AVCOAT samples under the modified profile conditions in refurbished ArcJet facilities at Ames Research Center. They modeled scenarios in which the heat shield lost far more material than Artemis 1 experienced. And in every simulation, cabin integrity held. The agency's own estimate for overall mission risk falls somewhere between 1 in 50 and 1 in 2. At the optimistic end, that is roughly a 2% chance of crew loss. At the other end, it is a coin flip. NASA's official threshold for acceptable risk on Artemis missions is 1 in 30. Rick Henfling is the lead entry flight director. His entire focus on this mission is getting the crew through re-entry alive. He runs the team in Houston that monitors every descent parameter in real time. Except during the most critical window, he will not be able to do any of that. That blackout has haunted human spaceflight since the Mercury program in the early 1960s. At hypersonic speeds, the plasma sheath absorbs and reflects radio waves across virtually every usable frequency band. No signal gets in, no signal gets out. For roughly 4 minutes during peak heating, Rick Henfling and every flight controller in Houston will sit at their consoles, staring at blank screens and waiting. During those 4 minutes, sealed inside a capsule pushed to the edge of its design limits, the crew will have nothing to do except trust the engineering and wait for the plasma to thin. In April 1970, the crew of Apollo 13 re-entered after their service module was crippled by an oxygen tank explosion. Nobody knew whether the heat shield on the command module had been damaged by the blast. The expected blackout was 3 minutes. It stretched past 4, then 5, then 6. Gene Kranz and his team sat in total silence, staring at a clock and a blank screen. When Charlie Duke finally heard Jack Swiggert's voice cut through the static, the room broke. 33 years later, Columbia broke apart during re-entry on February 1, 2003, because a piece of foam insulation had struck the thermal protection tiles on the wing's leading edge during launch, and nobody caught it in time. The crew never received a warning. Mission Control did not know until the telemetry disappeared and never returned. Heat shield failure during re-entry is not a theoretical risk. It has killed 7 people. There is something about re-entry that no other phase of spaceflight shares. Launch is violent, but it is a beginning, full of thrust, noise, and the raw energy of leaving. The coast between Earth and the Moon is quiet. Wiseman told reporters during a live downlink that he watched the entire globe from pole to pole as the sun set behind it. And the way he paused in the middle of the sentence made it obvious that the experience had outrun his vocabulary. But re-entry is a reckoning. The angle has to be exactly right. Too shallow, and the capsule skips off the atmosphere and disappears into deep space forever. Too steep, and the G-forces or heating exceed what both the vehicle and the crew can survive. The shield has to hold, the parachutes have to deploy in sequence, the cabin has to remain sealed. Everything happens in minutes, not hours, while falling at speeds that turn air into fire. Orion's heat shield measures 5 meters across. It is the largest ablative shield ever built for a crewed spacecraft. Those 186 Avicoat blocks range from about 2.5 to 7.5 centimeters thick. That is the margin, a few centimeters of a material engineered to burn at a precisely controlled rate, standing between 4 human beings and plasma that would vaporize exposed metal before the brain could even register what was happening. After peak heating, assuming the shield holds, Orion will still be descending fast. At roughly 7,600 meters altitude, 2 drogue parachutes deploy to stabilize the capsule and slow it from around 480 km per hour. Then 3 pilot parachutes pull out 3 enormous main canopies, reducing the descent rate to approximately 27 km per hour. Splashdown is planned in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego, where a U.S. Navy amphibious transport dock will be waiting. If it works, Artemis II will have proven something the entire future of American lunar exploration depends on. Not simply that Orion can fly to the moon and back. Artemis I already proved that. What Artemis II must demonstrate is that Orion can bring human beings home from deep space, that the heat shield can protect a crew in the most extreme thermal environment any crewed vehicle has ever faced, and that the modified re-entry profile solves the gas pressure problem. Artemis III, the mission that will actually land astronauts on the lunar surface, cannot fly until Artemis II proves that the trip home is survivable. There is another layer of risk in this mission beneath the heat shield story. The crew launched during the peak of solar cycle 25, when the sun is at its most volatile. Beyond the Van Allen belts, a single large solar particle event could deliver a significant radiation dose. Orion contains a small radiation shelter within the capsule, the most shielded corner the crew can crowd into if a solar storm erupts. Whether that shelter is truly adequate for a worst-case event has never been tested with humans aboard. All 4 crew members reviewed the heat shield investigation. They saw the photographs of the Artemis I damage. They studied the modified descent profile, the risk numbers, and the test data. They understood what 1 in 50 means, and what 1 in 2 means. They got into the capsule anyway. Reed Wiseman spent years landing fighter jets on aircraft carrier decks at night, which is basically parking a car going 250 km per hour onto a moving platform the size of a tennis court, in the dark, over open ocean. Victor Glover flew combat missions and has already lived aboard the International Space Station. Christina Koch spent 328 consecutive days in orbit, at the time the longest single spaceflight by a woman. Jeremy Hansen is a former CF-18 fighter pilot and the only member of the crew who has never been to space. Around April 10th, Orion will reach entry interface 122,000 meters above Earth's surface, where the atmosphere becomes thick enough to matter. The European-built service module, which has provided power, propulsion, water, and breathable air for the entire mission, will separate from the crew module and burn up in the atmosphere behind them. Everything disposable gets thrown away before re-entry. The launch abort system, the solid rocket boosters, the core stage engines, the service module. One by one, every component of the 30-story rocket that carried 4 people off the surface of Earth has been discarded until all that remains is a capsule roughly the size of a large SUV falling alone. Orion will rotate until the heat shield faces the direction of travel. The guidance computer will take over, making tiny adjustments to the capsule's angle of attack using small reaction control thrusters, trimming the trajectory toward the splashdown zone. Within 90 seconds, the temperature will cross 2,000 degrees. Plasma will wrap around the capsule like a fist, and then, exactly as promised, the radio will die. For 4 minutes, the crew of Artemis 2 will be alone with physics. No ground support, no telemetry link. In Houston, Rick Henfling and his team will stare at blank screens and count the seconds. They have trained for this silence. Simulation is not the same as the real thing, but they know that. Everyone in that room knows that when the signal returns, when that first fragment of voice or data punches through the thinning plasma, every person in mission control will know the answer to the only question that has mattered since this mission was conceived. The shield held, or it did not. 54 years ago, we stopped going to the moon. We had the technology, we had the rockets, we had astronauts willing to fly, but we stopped. And for more than half a century, the farthest humans traveled was a few hundred kilometers above Earth's surface, circling in low orbit, close enough to see city lights at night. Artemis 2 is the first step back, not a giant leap, a proof of concept. 4 people flying in a vehicle that has never carried a crew around a destination humanity abandoned 2 generations ago, protected by a shield that did not behave the way it was supposed to the last time it flew. Everything that comes after this, every lunar landing, every long-duration stay on the surface, every piece of infrastructure we build beyond Earth, depends on what happens in the next few days. If the signal comes back, the moon becomes a destination again. If it does not, everything stops. We will know soon. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to Exalume, drop your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.